Welcome to Ahead of the Game, a podcast brought to you by the Digital Marketing Institute. I'm your host, Will Francis. Today I'm talking to Sarah Adam, Head of Partnerships and Influencer Marketing at Wix, where she focuses on Wix end-to-end web creation platform for agencies and enterprises called Wix Studio. Welcome to the podcast, Sarah. It's great to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I've been waiting to talk to someone like you for a while about influencer marketing from your side as a brand. Just start by telling us a little bit about what you do there.
Of course. So I have been at Wix now for 5 years and taking care of influencer marketing for the past 3. And what we do, I have a team of 6, and when I kind of explain what we do to someone who's less familiar with what influencer marketing is, it's basically a very cool type of partnership. I personally love it, where we are working with influencers who are obviously relevant to our target audience, relevant to our brief, to our product, to our niche. And we work with them where we are basically paying them to create content that's compelling, that works, that performs well, that brings value. And we're not only paying them to create the content, but also to distribute it on their own channels. That's kind of how I explain it. Of course, there's so much more depth to that, and we'll talk about that, but that's in a nutshell. And in addition to working with influencers, we also do other types of partnerships, brand partnerships, podcast. So there's many and varied.
Interesting. And just remind everybody, I'm sure a lot of our listeners know about Wix, but just remind us what Wix currently is today and the differentiation between that and Wix Studio.
Yeah, so it's a good question. So Wix as a company, as a brand, has been around now for over 18 years. Which is a long time, and we have over 300 million users worldwide, which is super cool. And basically Wix has forever been a product where anyone and everyone can create a website, quickly and easily on their own without the help of an agency or a designer or a developer, so it gives you complete creative freedom in that sense. However, Wix also has quite a few B2B solutions, which were more significantly developed over the past, say, 5 years. And in August 2023, Wix launched Wix Studio. So that is their official B2B solution, which is, like you said at the beginning, an end-to-end web creation platform that is for people that build websites at scale. So not people that are building a website for their own business, but rather it could be web designers, web developers, agencies, freelancers, enterprises. So anyone who's creating websites at scale and need a more advanced solution than the kind of classic Wix editor that is, has been around for such a long time. So my team, we focus on partnerships, on the marketing side of things, influencers, podcasts for the B2B solutions.
It's interesting that. There's a couple of things I want to ask you about that. I'll ask you about B2B in a minute, but there's an interesting brand situation or brand problem, you could say there, where everybody thinks of Wix as probably the most consumer-friendly way of getting a website live. If you're not technical, you imagine a drag-and-drop editor, templates. If you've got a small business like a florist, you imagine there's a template for you. You just put in your details. You've got a website in a few hours. So you're actually working on driving awareness of something different to a far more advanced user base.
Yeah.
So do you think influencer marketing has a unique power to do that job of a new kind of positioning?
So that's what we've learnt, and we're still, so we...
You didn't know when you started out by the sound of it.
No.
Interesting, yeah.
Who does know when they start out?
Exactly, yeah.
So Wix, the launch of Wix Studio is a really interesting kind of branding challenge, because Wix has invested so much in the brand perception that Wix equals everyone. You know, that Wix is easy to use, it's simple, it's quick, anyone can do it, anyone can do it, anyone can do it. And then with the launch of our B2B solution, we're like, wait a minute, it's not for everyone, it's actually for professionals. So we were well aware before launching the product that we would have this brand challenge, this perception challenge, that when we're talking about the B2B solution and the value it brings to agencies, to freelancers, to professional web designers and web developers, we knew, obviously from talking to them in any case, but anyway, it was obvious to us that there would be a perception gap that we need to deal with. And it's not going to be so easy to close. It's going to take time. And the thought of working with influencers was because of that challenge and the understanding that, especially today and the way we are so connected through social media and the power that influencers have on communities. So we realized that working with them would help us slowly but surely close that gap.
You've got this very specific message you want to get out there, and you sort of acknowledge that you can do that yourself till you're blue in the face through advertising and what have you, but having other people talk about this, you know, not totally new positioning, but a new side to the business that is positioned differently, is it's a smart way to get over that. And I thought it was worth acknowledging that you don't know that works until you try it, and that's marketing. And
and
that
also
has worked for you. How have you measured it? How do you know it's worked? You know, how have you measured that?
Yeah, so I want to add to what you said, and to say, in any case, you know, influencer marketing is a long game.
True.
It's not something that, okay, I'm going to do one campaign, I'm going to work with 5 influencers, and boom, like, you know, I've achieved what I've achieved, now I'm going to move on and do other things. It's something that you need to invest time in, and you have to be consistent, and there's a learning curve, there's a lot of trial and error, you need to move quickly, learn from failures, improve, and it does take time to see results. Like, you need to understand that it's not a quick win. So we launched, I mean, so to you know, what you were saying before, I mean, so if we launched in August 2023, you know, it took months to start to see an impact, because that's the way it is. There's so much noise on social media, so you need to be not only consistent, but you need to be working with a considerable number of influencers to even be heard within that noise.
I get the distinct impression a lot of people perceive it as a much quicker process. But anyway, go on and tell me more about that measurement.
Yeah, measurement. So measurement, I guess, as anything in marketing, the question before that is, well, what do you want to measure? Like, what is your KPI? And then, well, how are you going to measure it? So I can say that for us, at least, influencer marketing has always been a brand awareness play. So we're interested in the performance of the content. Like, we're interested in as many eyes as possible on that content, relevant eyes, of course. So we're measuring like impressions, we're measuring engagement, and you know, if your goal were to be different, if it were to be user acquisition, then you don't care as much about that, right? You'd be using UTMs, and you'd be measuring, again, whatever KPI you set to yourself, if it's traffic through those UTMs, if it's new
UTMs being the way that we track
links.
Our links, just for anyone who's that listening.
And that also affects the channels you're going to choose to focus on. So if you want to measure new users, you're not going. It wouldn't be advised to do an Instagram reel where you can't share a link, for example, or a TikTok video. However, YouTube and LinkedIn could be like way more relevant, right? So it's really important at the very early stages of the campaign to define the goals, the KPI, how you're going to measure it, because that affects the channels that you want to be on.
Yeah, that's interesting. That again, so being clear on that, where you are in the funnel. Is it awareness? Is it getting people to think more deeply about you? Is it actually converting people? That will dictate, like you say, the channels you're on, formats, and therefore obviously the influencers that you work with. I mean, you talk about being long term. I suppose that the reason that scares people is it's like, how much of a money pit is this going to become, right? So how do you budget for long term influencer marketing that's not just one short campaign that's quite easy to contain?
Yeah, so I always say, like, if let's say you're a brand that has never ever worked with influencers and you have no clue how much they charge, how much you need per campaign, you don't even know where to start, okay? Because that was the point I was at 3 years ago. And what I did is I did my research. So I started to, according to whatever it is that I'm, the product I want to promote or raise awareness to or drive registrations to think about, okay, what type of influencers would it make sense for them to talk about me? So I would start with research, and once I had a list of, say, at least 20, ideally 30, I reached out to them all via email, and I explained, I'm working on a new campaign. I think you could be suitable, like share your pricing with me. How do you typically work with brands? Give me examples of stuff that you've done. And when you get all that data, so now you know how much, let's say, in an ideal world, 30 influencers charge, and they're all within the same niche, then you're getting a really good idea of how much budget you need for such a campaign. If you want to do, let's say, 2 posts with each of these 30, for their campaign, you can calculate it, and you're much smarter that way, and you can create your own benchmarks before you've even started working with these people. So that's, and I mean, from talking to other influencer marketing professionals as well as different creators and agencies, I do see that pricing varies from niche to niche. So don't compare, like if you're in MarTech, for example, don't compare yourself to pricing of beauty influencers. It's not going to be the same. So you really need to do those reach outs and speak to influencers in your space to get a better idea of pricing.
Yes, I very much get that. Did you find any particular useful sources of benchmarking data? Any particularly good tools for doing that research?
So the truth is no. The best way is to get it from the influencers. The best way is to just start with your first campaign, and the more you work with influencers, again, within the same niche, within the same vertical, you're going to get wiser and wiser, right? So if I look back at my first deals, there's some that really give me the cringe. I think, oh my God, I can't, because I can see when I compare to, to deals, let's say, to agreements that say, like, I don't know, 6 months later, I knew what a good, how much I should be paying for a post. At the very beginning, you don't really know, but then you need to pass that learning curve to improve. I really don't think that, now there are tools for influencer discovery, and within those tools they tell you, oh, this is how much this influencer charges. I have never ever been in a situation where that's true. I'll look at prices that are being suggested for influencers that I've either worked with, and I know how much they charge, and it's
because the tools they all do that, and what
I don't know
based
how
on a very
to
simple calculation, isn't it, of followers engagement or something like that.
I guess they have some sort of, but look, I wish there was some sort of magic formula that everyone would go by that takes into consideration all the different metrics. I haven't come across that, and I haven't been able to create one based on the data I have. And I've obviously heard people talk to me about CPMs. As a creator myself, people mention CPMs, which I never loved the sound of because it's sort of commoditizing. But that's not really what you're buying here. Of course,
it's not that, is it? It's not cost per 1,000 views or anything like that.
No, we measure CPM when we want to compare like between campaigns or between months, we don't use it as a measurement to select an influencer. We do use it like if we've worked with an influencer, let's say we worked with them for, I don't know, 3 months, and we want to look back and we want to decide, is it worth working with them again? Then yes, like let's look at, how many views did they bring? How many, let's look.
It's one way to standardise bang for buck, isn't it?
Yeah, but I personally never reach out to influencers and say, hey, my CPM is $50. I don't. I'm sure it does. Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
Do you use any of these kind of platforms like kind of Modash and things like that, influencer discovery and management platforms?
So we don't use, and there are many A to Z platforms, or at least platforms that claim to take you from A to Z. But we've realized that they don't, or, I think it very much depends on the workflow, the size of company. Like us as an enterprise, I haven't been able to find a tool that will really help me, rather than, it feels like I'm working for the tool rather than the tool working for me. So we don't, but there are many out there. And for discovery is a very kind of sensitive topic, I think, for anyone in the industry. And it's really not easy, because even if you have a tool like Modash you mentioned, so yes, within minutes you'll have a beautiful list, but that's really not where your work only begins there with the list, because you need to review every single one on that list. No one's going to send out a blast email reach out without like properly examining, looking through the influencer's content. Is it really suitable? Is it really the style that you want? It's not, I find at least, it's not wise to make a decision just based on the numbers. So that's why I haven't found a tool that really saves me time, makes me more efficient. And what we do find, my team and I, is that the best way to find influencers is actually within the platforms, using the relevant keywords. And once you find someone good, you go through this kind of maze of, okay, who do they follow and who's following them and who's commenting on them. And the truth is that to really find the good ones, you need to be part of that niche. Like, you need to be part of the community. So, if you're following them on your, let's say, Instagram, your feed will become that niche, right? And then with the algorithm, you'll be getting new recommendations. So that's the way we found the best influencers, is actually organically. So you don't have to have a tool to do well in influencer marketing.
No, and I suppose particularly when you work in-house like you can fully inhabit the niche day to day. Like you can fill your feed, and then you get obviously recommendations of other people to follow, and like you say, you go down the rabbit hole of that niche. So, and you're right, and that works perfectly well, doesn't it? Just run me past that again. So, what's your sort of selection criteria? What are you looking for? Briefly?
Yeah. So, and what I'm saying now could be more relevant to B2B than B2C. But for us, the title, so the profession of the influencer is key. So in our case, they must be, for example, either a web developer, a web designer, and the reason why is because we want them to create content that is of the level of a professional web designer, for example. So if they're a logo designer or a graphic designer that's never done web, then, as lovely as they may be, it's just not relevant for us for that specific campaign or example or whatever. So for us, it's the profession that's like a deal breaker or maker. And then when we start to look at the numbers, so following has proven to not be relevant. We note it, it's important to take a look at it, but it's not going to decide if we work with them or not. What is really important is how is their content performing and how consistent is it? So looking at metrics like impressions and different engagement metrics. Again, you don't need a tool for this. that it's, that there are enough metrics that are visible publicly for you to make a decision like that.
Instantly, really, can't you?
Yeah. So those are the things that we look at, and then only then, if all those, if I'm able to tick all those boxes, only then do I actually watch a video and see the quality and the style and stuff like that. So it's a process. It takes time, and like you need to be very focused and invest in it to choose the right ones.
Of course, I have to ask you, it's only a matter of time. I'm amazed we got this far without talking about it, but do you use AI at all in that process?
So, not in that process. Like, we use AI, LLMs, right, like ChatGPT, whatever, for the kind of day-to-day stuff. Like, it helps us create better briefs, or maybe in the feedback process, if we want to give specific feedback, it can help us like articulate better, to get feedback, like to get ideas for new briefs, but we don't, not for discovery, as crazy as that may sound.
No, it doesn't. No. I can imagine why.
Not yet.
What you do is a little bit similar to PR, and it's about it is one of the most human parts of marketing, really, isn't it? I completely understand. I would do it exactly. Historically, in the past when I've done influencer marketing, I've done it exactly as you described. So I agree. Let's pull back a bit and talk about B2B. So often when people think about influencer marketing, they think about beauty and food and lifestyle and fashion, things like that. Brands like Gymshark and Glossier, people like that. We don't traditionally think about B2B so much. What are you seeing happening in the B2B influencer marketing space? Is that booming at the moment?
Yeah, well, I think it is. LinkedIn is playing a huge part in that boom.
And creators on LinkedIn is such a hot space.
And creators on LinkedIn, yeah. And I think what's interesting is that because B2B, like I said before, because there's like a heavy focus on the profession of the influencer, where do they work, like, and especially, obviously on LinkedIn, that's like a big thing, and the ability on LinkedIn to be so granular in terms of the targeting, in terms of seeing, well, who's actually commenting, where do they work, is it relevant for us, like there's so many, you can go so much deeper on LinkedIn. So yes, I think it is booming, and I think more and more companies are kind of joining in on the fun, and seeing value. And I'm also seeing way more like nano influencers for B2B, right? Because if you're, depending on your niche, but you could find people on LinkedIn that get good engagement but maybe don't really have much following, like maybe they have, I don't know, 3,000 followers, so that's like quite low. I mean, that's nano, and it does happen that we'll reach out to influencers that have never worked with brands before, and then you're like their first gig,
which is great, right? Because they're really, I would say, quite invested in the opportunity.
Totally invested, yeah. However, it's not always that. It doesn't always go well, because I think many times kind of first time influencers, let's call it, they think that you want an ad, and they'll use wording that's just too like, and they lose their own authenticity. And I think what's interesting is like for them to find like a healthy balance between their own brand and their style and their language, and what are their followers used to, and wait a minute, does this actually bring them value? Like how, to not suddenly be like, whoa, what was that post? Where did that come from? What's going on? So so it's interesting, and that's very much, I think, true for B2B.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's interesting what you say about that, because I think about that a lot. So I'm a creator, and I work with brands in the AI and marketing space, right? And the reason why it's such hard work, people think, oh, you get all this money just for posting in social. It's actually really hard work, because you've got to promote someone's product whilst presenting it in the style of organic. And it has to be informationally rich, helpful content. It has to be valuable content.
Yeah.
It can't be empty, thin content.
Of course.
So it has to impart some value on the viewer, but at the same time, extolling the virtues of maybe a very specific feature that the client wants to highlight or something like that. And it's hard, you know. Some of these take me days to at least think about.
For sure.
Hours to make. And I think that is something that a creator or influencer gets better at over time, for sure.
Yeah, I think also, and this is something I've been seeing, I think for the past couple of months at least, and it's getting like quite almost annoying now, is like the use of ChatGPT for posts. And I think it does make it even more challenging. Like on one hand, it's easier, you could say, like influencers using ChatGPT to create their sponsored posts. But I'm like genuinely concerned that we're losing their authenticity.
Yeah, big time. I mean, my personal rule with my content is nothing that sees the light of day is created by AI. I use AI all the time and I talk about it, but the stuff that sees the light of day, that's where you're supposed to shine, right?
I agree. And you know how, I don't know what your feed is like, but my feed is filled with like SEO is dead, marketing is dead.
Yeah, very similar feeds. I often see you leaving quite dry comments on some of the stuff in my feed now. So.
And I think you know what's dead is authenticity is dying, guys. Like, please just stop it. Like, I want to throw up from my feet sometimes. It's like, oh my god. So
that's what happens though when you reward people with attention, isn't it? You then get people trying to hack.
Of course, and copy.
Attention, and people will do anything for it. And X is dead. I mean, that's been a headline. I mean, wasn't it the editor of Wired about 20 years ago did that really famous piece like the web is dead along with the internet or something? And people have been riffing on that for the last 20 years.
Yeah, and now recently with these plastic figure, I don't know what they're even called. The
the ChatGPT generator with the plastic action figure. And
it's like, guys, you're late, okay? The train.
I saw someone post one of those today, actually.
I know, me too, several times.
Got hundreds of likes, and sometimes being late is actually okay, because in reality that's when the mainstream starts to notice is like
you're right.
But anyway, that's another topic entirely. But yeah, oh well, that's absolutely interesting. So about B2B, but it's not all on LinkedIn. Surely there's.
Of course, yeah.
You are using TikTok, Instagram, and because that's the other thing. Obviously, thing I'm always telling people is like, people don't put a suit on and just sit on LinkedIn for a bit.
Oh my God, no.
This other Severance style version of themselves when they use Instagram. Like, people use all the platforms.
Yeah.
So presumably you acknowledge that, and you are doing B2B influencer marketing in
B2B. Yeah, B2B influencer marketing needs to be, you need to be where your users or potential users are. If they're on Instagram, you need to be there, because if you're not, your competitors are, and if they're not, well, that's a huge missed opportunity. But it does depend, and this goes back to what we spoke to right at the beginning of your goals. So, we find that Instagram, TikTok is great for brand awareness, but not if you're trying to drive new users. It's not good. So it depends. Again, what your goals are, but for sure, I would not limit to LinkedIn. No.
Oh, do you know what I'd like? I'd love to hear from you. Right, is just to run through the platforms and tell me what you think they're best at.
Yeah.
So we'll hit the big five, or you can leave X if you want. It's up to you. But what are the big platforms best for in terms of having certain kinds of results?
So the way I look at it is, so like I said, TikTok, Instagram, brand awareness. So you could say like top of funnel. Right. YouTube, when I say YouTube, I mean long form, not shorts. YouTube very much for at least for us, and for things I'm seeing, educational content. So more I guess like mid-funnel. I don't know, like people who have obviously a much higher intent. They're searching for something specific. They have a problem. They need to learn about it. So definitely YouTube for that. And also, like I said before about they're using, tracking links, which on YouTube is very, common practice. So also for, user acquisition. As for X and LinkedIn, so I'd say LinkedIn is actually, and X, I put them kind of in the same category, and I think they're good for both. They're good for both brand awareness, but also for driving registrations, new users, according to your goals.
What about newsletters and podcasts?
Yeah, so podcasts, I see that as pure brand awareness. I mean, I don't think anyone clicks on any links in the description if they even open the description. So yeah, podcasts for me definitely brand awareness, unless the ad includes some sort of discount code, and then that's like a more powerful CTA and an higher intent to go online and go into that website and use if you were able to remember the code. Newsletters, in my mind, it's for user acquisition.
Yes, because it did cross my mind. I've seen sponsored newsletters driving some quite good results, because obviously people are in clicky mode, so it can work, can't it? Interesting. So I've got to say, this sounds like a lot of work, and very fruitful work. So I'm intrigued now. Tell me a bit about your team. Like, how many people there are, who does what, kind of thing.
Yeah, we have we're a team of 6, and the way it's divided, it's so we there's the platforms that we focus on. So each one has a different focus. Like we don't have too much overlaps. Of course, like when needed, one will help the other, and etc. And then there is a bit of overlap, but we do try to kind of focus on the different platforms. So we do have, each person is able to develop like deeper understanding of the platform, and also to be able to just be more, again, like we spoke to before, like to kind of live the niche. So not only the niche, but in that specific platform.
So is it literally one person's job to be doing Wix Studio on Instagram with influencers?
For example, yeah.
Interesting. Right. Okay. That's a smart approach, like you say, so they can just be immersed, native to the channel, as it were.
It's also, I mean, that person has a very interesting perspective, because they're working simultaneously with different influencers. The brief could be the same or similar, and they're seeing how X number of people are using the same brief to create totally different content, and it gives you a really interesting kind of bird's eye view of how creators work, what they define as important, what trends they're using at the moment, what works for this one may work for that one. So there's ways where we could actually help, or it's really interesting.
That's interesting. I'm curious, when you speak to creators, this might sound like a really daft question, because the answers should be obvious. What do creators want, apart from the obvious thing of money?
Money. So I think, I guess you'd need to ask the creators, but I know that the creators we work with for long term, they very much like that stability. To kind of deepen the relationship, to deepen their knowledge of the product, to be able to give their own ideas, not just to be dependent on us feeding them a brief, and the creative freedom. I think that's very important to influencers. Like, I'd say most of them, prefer, it's important to them to have that freedom, which we very much try to give them. So we try to kind of define the guidelines, kind of the borders, as it were, but to not tell them how to do it. So to be very clear as to what we want, what is considered success, how we're going to measure it, but to let them decide how they're going to do it, in their style. So we'll never tell them what to say. For example, we're not going to give them a script.
Yeah, you give them a brief, but not a script.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. And just thinking back to the team, I mean, how integrated are they with the social media team, the marketing team there?
Yeah, so we work very closely, obviously. Like, it's very important. I think, generally speaking, it's important for your influencer strategy to be aligned with your social media strategy.
Yeah.
After all, in, I'd say, all cases, you want any influencer post to tag your brand. So if anyone does click on it, they reach your page. So it has to talk to each, it needs to be aligned to an extent. You don't want, but there needs to be a healthy balance, because you don't want your influencer content to look exactly like yours, because that would be boring.
No, but do you repost influencer posts, and do you use them as ads?
So that very much varies on the brief and the need. It's definitely a possibility. Obviously, it needs to be within the agreement in terms of rights and all that stuff. Definitely possible. On all platforms, you can boost influencer posts either from their channel, or you can use, obviously, again, with the permission of the influencer, it needs to be in the agreement where you use it as an ad on your channel. So it very much depends.
And you pay extra for that, of course. There's a usage fee.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it needs to be part of the deal. It could be extra, it could be included, but it needs to be there.
But that's just another reason, isn't it, why that needs to be integrated. So you don't want your marketing team turning around and going, why are all these ads going out from our channel?
Of course. A healthy team is one that communicates. Yeah, it needs to be aligned, for sure.
Yeah. You mentioned long-term collaborations with influencers who, I suppose, over time kind of start to become ambassadors. Again, my personal take on this, which I don't know if this is common, but my personal take is I actually find multi-post collaborations with brands quite tough, because it's hard. You kind of you risk running out of new things, interesting ways to talk about that product. So personally, I prefer shorter term things. But how does that work with you? How do you incentivize people to have a longer term relationship?
So that's an interesting point. I've never personally come across an influencer saying, oh no, I don't want to sign a long-term deal because I don't know what I would say. I guess it depends on the tool, the product, what it is, but we will only sign a long-term deal if we are confident that there's enough to say, that there's enough to talk about, because we know what's coming. We have
quite a complex, multifaceted product. I suppose thinking about it, a lot of the things
there are many.
I talk about are like single feature products often.
Yeah. So. No, that's for sure. So, but like we spoke about before, I mean, again, I've never been declined by an influencer who, if the first deal went well, and that's usually going to be, say, up to 5 assets as like a test. And the reason why it's usually up to 5 is because, let's say this is an influencer that's never used our product before. There's a learning curve. Like, there's a lot of investment that they need to do. Like you spoke before about how long it takes to think of the idea. Yeah. So in our case, they need to build something. They need to really invest time in learning the product, because the content they create needs to be of a certain standard. Like they need to show complexity, not like a basic level of usage. So we realize, we respect, that it takes time. We need to kind of warm up. So they need to invest time in learning the product, and there's a warm ups in terms of like the content, the first reel, then the second reel, the third. Like, it takes time for them to learn us, what we like or what our feedback is usually like. We try to be very minimal with our feedback, but and then when you have someone long term, like they know, like there's certain things they won't even send us for approval because they already know that, I don't know, we don't like them to use that word. Yeah. Or we, so the more you work together, so you learn each other and things are quicker. So if we have some really cool idea for a brief, so I'll get a much quicker turnaround with someone that I've worked with now for 6 months than a brand new partnership.
Yes, yeah,
so
that's true.
They
do become kind of ongoing partners. I get that. That's really interesting to hear about.
Yeah.
I'm curious actually, because you've seen all of this from your side. If a friend asked you, Sarah, I'm thinking of becoming a creator and trying to make that a full-time thing, what would you advise them? Would you say don't do it, or?
No, I would say do it. I would definitely say do it, but I think it's critical, especially if you haven't started yet, is to define your niche. And it could be something extremely specific, but you need to have a content strategy, right? Like if you want to work with brands, if you want to monetize, you want to make money from it. So it needs to be something that if I'm a brand and I land on your page, it needs to be crystal clear to me. Who are you and what do you do? What's your thing? And is that thing what I'm looking for? Yes or no? So I personally prefer, and I told you how we choose influencers and how important the profession is and the content is. So that's always my piece of advice, is choose a niche that you're passionate about, that you can create consistently about, that you're not going to get bored after, 2 weeks.
You've got to be happy to be pigeonholed, haven't you? You've
yeah,
got to be
that's
happy
what
with
I
that
think.
And not get bored of that pigeonhole.
That's what I think, and I think today there's oh my god, there's tools every week. There's new tools rolling out to the market. I don't know, just pick your niche and.
Yeah.
But yes, it's really important that it's something that kind of that you truly love. Cause
absolutely, yeah.
I don't know how long it will last if you don't, because it will come out, it will shine through in your content.
True. Well, and it's funny because I've noticed, I found you on LinkedIn. I just noticed you cropping up in my feed. You clearly spend time, for want of a better phrase, building a personal brand.
Yeah.
So, like a lot of us are out there doing on LinkedIn, not just for visibility, but just for sometimes the joy of partaking in the conversation. I can see that from the way that you operate, for sure. But the value that you give that I really like is you are very open and transparent about how you work, and by doing that you give away information that's actually quite rare. It's not what other people are saying. Recently I saw you screenshot a spreadsheet of an influencer campaign, and that's rare, so that's valuable, and people flock towards it. So I suppose my question to you is, do you think, what do you think of the value of people in marketing building a personal brand?
Yeah, I think it's really powerful. It's not easy, right? It's a lot of work. I decided to invest in it. It was in January 24, so over a year ago. And I remember that I was sitting on my couch at home, and it was like a Friday night. It was like past midnight already, and I was like, oh, I should really go to bed. And I was just scrolling on my LinkedIn, and my LinkedIn feed was, this was pre ChatGPT, okay, so it wasn't as bad as it is today, but it was, I just felt like it was so fake, and it was filled with people posting, and this still happens today, unfortunately, posting about, telling other people what they should be doing.
Yeah.
without giving any credibility or explaining why they think that or how they reached that decision, or how did they fail, what did they do to fail to learn that lesson. It's just like, this is what you got to do. And I always I've never enjoyed those posts. They kind of tick me off. And then
just flooded with them these days.
Mostly
that.
Even more. It's really frustrating. So then I decided to post that I would start posting. I'm going to invest like 2 weeks. I don't know.
Screw these guys. I'm going to start posting.
So I decided to start posting about, to first show credibility.
Yeah.
And you know what? Not even to tell people what to do. They'll read it and they'll learn from what I'm saying. People aren't stupid. They'll get it. So that's, and then it's funny, whenever in my life, if I want to take on something quite seriously, I always give it 2 weeks. I say, I'm going to give it 2 weeks, I'm going to do it, and then I'll decide. I'll decide after 2 weeks, I'll decide if I want it or not. And that's what I did. And then I started to really enjoy it. So I kept at it, and it's really incredible. I do recommend it, but you do need to understand, I think, 2 things. One is that you do need a strategy. You're not going to, don't just post, oh, I went to a conference. Seriously, no one cares that you went to the conference. So you need to have a strategy and, decide in advance, what is your niche, like we spoke about before. What are you going to focus on? Even if you don't plan to monetize, but there's, the reason you're doing it, I'm assuming, is you want to be associated with a certain profession or a certain level, or you want to be thought of as a thought leader in a certain field. So you need to stick to it. You need to be quite religious about it and not post about things that aren't related, and keep up the consistency.
Yes.
Which it's really not easy.
No, it's not. It's not. And just on that, before you go, I would love to ask you about your career, actually. Mm-hmm. Just sort of how you got here. I mean, let's really wind it back. Just out of interest, what did you want to be when you were a kid?
I think, I still don't know if I made the right decision. I mean, I do enjoy what I do, but yeah, exactly. And will we ever know? But when I was a kid, I actually wanted to be a psychologist, just because, and I still do today, I love listening to people's talking about their lives, their problems, not necessarily to help them, but just to listen. I really enjoy it. And then I remember as a kid, someone's like, you have to go to school for 8 years for that. And I was like, oh gosh, okay, maybe not. But I think I've always enjoyed anything to do with marketing or advertising. I remember as a kid, I would eat, my morning cereal, look at the cereal box and think of a different slogan. So I think I've always been drawn to it, and within marketing, I've always enjoyed partnerships. So working with third parties, if it's other tech companies, integrations, if it's brand partnerships.
What is that?
I don't know. I get a kick out of meeting new people all the time, which is wonderful. In partnerships, I could talk to easily 10 new people in 1 week, professionals within the industry, relevant. And I just really enjoy that first connection and the potential it brings and what can we do together, and then and just that making taking 2 things and just making a third. I don't know, it's difficult to put my finger on it.
It is interesting. No, you're right. These partnerships where you're getting 2 possibly quite different companies, maybe a media outlet and a tech company or something, and just seeing what can we do if we put these 2 things together.
Exactly.
So there's all that potential and the what if, and maybe we could do that, and it's quite fun, isn't it? It's something new. I
love it, and working with influencers is exactly that. Every time and time again. So yeah, I don't know, I enjoy it.
What advice would you give to your younger self starting out in marketing?
That's such a good question. I don't know. I don't know. I guess to just do what makes you happy.
Well, there's a lot of pitfalls in marketing, aren't there? There's a lot of ways to burn out. There's a lot of ways to stop enjoying. There's a lot of
Definitely.
ways to work at the wrong kind of companies.
Yeah.
You know, to feel like you're not really contributing. I mean, yeah, but you know, you've clearly, I don't know how intentionally, but you've clearly navigated a successful career. And just always like to try and work out, you know, what have you learned? What are the kind of key
Yeah.
insights you've had along the way?
Yeah, I think I always like let's say when you want, let's say you're not happy somewhere and you want to leave, and you're thinking of your next position or what do you want to do next, should you make a change. So I always try and look back and think of times of the time when I was happy with what I was doing, and then to try and analyze, well, what was it, what element in that project, campaign, work, job, whatever it was, like what was the thing that made me happy? Like what was it? Was it the creativity side of the process? Was it, you know, working with people external to my team? Like to try and put my finger on that thing, and then to think of other roles, opportunities where that skill takes place only much more, right? So I give an example, like before my work at Wix, I worked at a different company. It was like a MarTech company, and I was there for 5 years. The first 3 years I was doing field marketing, which totally it burnt me out at the end of it. Now, but I had such a great time. I really enjoyed it, and I remember asking myself, like, what did I enjoy about it? And then I realized that I loved working with every event. So you have like the vendors that you work with, there's the, or if if you're sponsoring a conference, then there's the people at the conference that you're talking to, or if like there's a speaking session, there's a customer that's going to speak, then you're talking with and I realized that I loved that, working with different types of people on different types of projects. Like it was really the relationships that I loved, and that's when I decided to kind of take that and move into partnerships.
Nice. Yeah, and it's because it's not always obvious. It requires a bit of thought, doesn't it? That bit of introspection.
For
What is it I
sure.
enjoyed about that, and then working out how could I engineer my kind of next move around that. Yeah, it's interesting. Look, I can see our time unfortunately coming to a close. I could talk to you all day about this stuff, Sarah. I really could, and I feel like I've learnt a lot
Great.
over the nearly hour that we've been chatting. Before you go, just remind people where they can find and connect with you online.
Yeah, so definitely LinkedIn. That's where I hang out. Send me a connect request. I promise to accept it.
Thank you.
And my email's visible on my profile. If anyone wants to shoot me an email, ask me a question, I'll
Perfect.
try.
Do that.
I'll try my best to respond.
Good stuff, Sarah. Well, thanks again. I really appreciate it, and I hope to chat to you again soon.
Cool. Thanks for having me.